Welcome to the official Bernardo Lopalo Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Akayani Chamberlain, Bernardo's oldest grandchild and manager for all aspects of Bernardo's legacy. Bernardo Lopalo enjoyed a long and healthy life, living free of any chronic diseases, until the day he died at the age of 114 in Tempe, Arizona on December 19, 2015. Born the son of a doctor and herbalist in Victoria, Brazil on August 17, 1901, he had 4 different careers. As a 5-star chef, in the healing arts, he worked as a massage therapist, reflexologist, and podiatrist, a natural health consultant, and, in his hundreds, as an author and lecturer on the keys to his health and longevity. Bernardo studied at La Sorbonne for the culinary arts in the 1920s, the Swedish Institute of Massage, and NYU in his 70s, the Robert Finance School of Hair and Makeup in his 80s, and as an herbologist well into his 90s. Noted for his smooth skin, dapper sartorial style, soothing voice, and sharp memory, he was a family man, the oldest living Yankees fan, and the oldest living Brazilian in the state of Arizona. Sought out by people from around the globe, he touched thousands of lives through radio, TV, and personal appearances, inspiring both young and old to add more life to their years instead of just years to their life. Listen, share, and be inspired. I conducted a series of interviews with people who had met and interacted with Bernardo after he passed the century mark, so they could share the impact Bernardo had had on their lives. People have often asked me if my grandfather Bernardo Lopalo could talk after he passed 100. Can he talk? They would say. I would jokingly reply, how much time do you have? Ladies and gentlemen, in this edition of the podcast, please allow me to introduce you to Dr. Jeff Eger, who listened to Bernardo talk for 14 hours straight. That's right, 14 hours. A world-renowned optometrist, Dr. Eger first met Bernardo when he was 111 years of age at a book signing he was conducting at the Raw Spirit Fest in Arizona. Hilarity ensues. If I could summarize this edition of the podcast, I'd call it Daddy Says.
Hey, my name is Dr. Jeff Eger. I'm an optometrist. I'm a holistic optometrist. I call him Dr. Bernardo because a podiatrist in this country is a doctor. And he was nice enough to give me a full day of his time, and I never sat in front of anybody for 14 hours.
How did you meet Bernardo?
I met him at a raw food convention that was for the state of Arizona, and it was being held at the Tatum and 101 where the Marriott Hotel was about 3 years ago.
Oh, so you met him at the Raw Spirit Fest.
That's what it was.
Aha.
And so I had bought an alkalizing machine because I'm doing some research with an eye disease called keratoconus, and saw somebody who was eating raw food that was highly alkalized with high fiber, and I saw her disease get much better, her eye disease called keratoconus. So I felt like when somebody was trying to sell me an alkalizing machine, that would be an extra addition to the raw food diet, since they're both alkaline in nature. So somebody said, you need to go over and meet this guy. He's 100, and at that time he was 111. And I looked and I said, well, where is he? There's this guy there sitting, signing books, and to me he looked like he was 40 or 50 years old. I said, that can't be a 111-year-old man. And they said, yeah, he's really 111. And so I said, I got to meet this guy, because I've been around trying to develop athletic champions, and my opinion was that anybody can look like that and walk around and not be bedridden at over 100 years old. That person, I need to pick his brain.
So what was your initial conversation with him like?
Well, first I had to buy his book. Bernardo is a businessman, okay? And then he would tell me his secrets. So I said, okay, if you want to learn something, you got to put an investment in it. So I said, sure. Your secrets are in the book. He said, yep. So I bought the book without question, and I asked him to sign my book, which he did. And then later on, of course, I bought his second edition of the book that you sold me when he passed away. but he was so busy signing books that he didn't have time to answer my questions, so he invited me very graciously to his home.
And he was living where at the time?
He was living in Mesa at the time.
And what happened during the course of that? What time did you arrive?
Okay,
Let's put it that way.
I'm not exaggerating, but I got there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's New Year's Day, and I love football, and there's no way I'm going to miss any football games on New Year's Day. So Bernardo has his TV on, watching TV on a chair that reclines like a lazy boy, and he's watching the football games. So I thought, well, I'll watch football games with him a little bit and then pick his brains a little bit after. He went right into all the stuff when he was a little kid growing up with his daddy, he called him, and all the fundamentals of long life that his daddy taught him. And all I heard every half an hour to an hour is daddy says. I must have heard that at least 3 times an hour. So I'm saying to myself, how many times do you hear kids idolize their parents and do exactly what they tell them to do? That's pretty rare. So then when I heard the fundamentals that his daddy gave him, I said, this is a smart guy. There's a difference, in my opinion, being smart or intelligent. Smart people are performers. Intelligent people think the world revolves around them. They're stiff and they don't perform to their top potential. So if you want to get somebody who's going to have a longer life and be top in sports, that's a smart person. They react to what they see if they see correctly, and they just do it without thought. They're also childlike. And my first impression of Bernardo was, here's a child in wonderment of still learning. If you're still learning, you're still living. I think to his last day, of course you saw him on his last day, but I think up to his last day of living, he was still learning.
He was, in fact. I checked in on him. See, it was at that morning, and he was sitting there with a stack of 4 thick books on health.
Mm-hmm.
And he had his notepad out and his pen, and he was reading and he's taking notes. So it's definitely a wonderful lesson if at 114 a person still feels that they need to be learning and they haven't come to the end of learning. It's a wonderful example for us.
So a child is in wonderment of learning. And my first impression of Bernardo is here's a 111-year-old man in a child's soul. And I thought to myself, man, this is kind of cool talking to him, because he had so many stories. He flat wore me out. He had more energy than I did.
I've heard you say and talk about vision, and you've enumerated those and outlined those things a few times for me in relationship to Bernardo, but if you'd be so kind as to say that now for the people that are listening.
When I work with people's vision, I just don't correct it. I try to improve it. And I found out, again, with working with athletes and with these keratoconic patients who have these very steep and warped corneas that get more and more diseased, when you start to learn how to see the big picture, is what I call it. They call being in the zone the psychological people. And I don't believe a lick in psychology. I believe in the soul. When you're up in your head, you're restricted. When you're down in your soul, you're wise. Bernardo, to me, could see the big picture. He was very wise, and he was a very simplistic teacher. The problem was that he kept on telling me so much stuff I had to stop. He was overloading me with very important information for a long and quality life. And this is a performer or a champion that knows how to perform in life. So who are you going to read? You're going to read some professional that writes about how to live longer and usually dies about 50 or 60? Or you're going to listen to a man that's 114 years old and looks like a 40-year-old? I'm listening to the performer. So I just sat there. I think I went to the bathroom one time, and he told me I talked too much because I had to interrupt him and ask questions because he couldn't take that much information.
So let me ask you, so you say you arrived at 10 in the morning. When did you actually leave Bernardo's house?
12 o'clock at night.
At midnight.
And he was still going.
And he was still going.
I mean, he wore me out.
So,
and I said, I'm sorry, but, I know you have to get to bed, but I said, I want to know, you eat raw food. I went to the raw food convention to ask people why raw food works. And I got lots of different answers, but nobody really, I don't think, really knew. And from what I understand, your father raised you to eat raw. And can you explain to me, as a cook and also a devotee of your father, that taught you how to eat properly. If you could tell me why it works. Instead of answering my question, Bernardo holds up the Holy Bible and he says, "It's all in here." I thought, whoa, this guy is deep. Okay. I mean, it's all in the faith and it's all in the Bibles and it's all from generations ago when we were food gatherers, and that's what the Bible says to eat. And I guess that's what his daddy told him. It comes from the Bible, but he never questions his daddy because he trusted his daddy. So a person that trusts that much in their parents trusts that much in God, and that's why he was faith-based.
Bernardo was referring to the passages in the Bible that talk about herbs, that talk about using olive oil, eating nuts and seeds, all of what we would say today are superfoods. That's what we call them today. Essentially, he was teaching timeless principles of health and wellness.
That's a very good way of expressing it.
And
I would agree with that.
Yeah, saying, I didn't invent this. There's nothing really new under the sun. And, my father was passing on to me, what's there, what's sort of hidden in plain sight. Dr. Eger explained to me the 4 qualities of a champion that he saw in Bernardo.
Well, first of all, I've been fortunate enough to have 18 champions, and I had 3 on the PGA Tour. And golfers are very much up into their head, which I found is a handicap instead of a plus. I think I'm a very, very good observer. I'll match my observational skills against anybody. So Yogi Berra, who I read all of his books, talks very simple and writes very simple. And he said you can observe a lot by watching. I really believe that. So the 4 characteristics that I saw just by observing, first off, they look like 4-year-olds to me, children in wonderment that don't use their brain, use their soul. The first one for a champion is they have to be selfish. And I say selfish in a positive manner because if you teach them anything traditional or non-traditional that works or improves their performance, what I call is efficient performance. Efficiency to me is perfect performance with the least amount of time and energy. So that's working smart or playing smart. When you're selfish, you'll practice those techniques harder than anybody else because you want to be the best, not better. The second one is that they stay in the present moment. In other words, they just make the best of the present situation. That's all it is. And 3, they see the biggest picture under the highest amount of stress in the shortest period of time. Bernardo could do that in spades. I think he could just flat out do it. Never thought about anything, just flat did it. And I really believe that he saw the big picture, which made his whole body loose. So he had better blood flow. That's just a guess, but just observing his face, that's what I saw. But the last one is they're dumb like a fox. They're too dumb to see the obstacles and just see the goal. So the straightest line to the goal is from point A to point B, a straight line. They don't bob and weave. They just go for it. Bernardo had that too. I mean, he's just one of the most amazing people I ever met, and he let me in his house for, literally a whole day. He swore by olive oil. And he told me that, my complexion is so good. Yeah, I want to know. And he said, I put olive oil, whatever's good for your body inside is also good for your body outside. And so I said, well, what do you put on your body outside? He says, every morning I wake up after my shower and I bathe myself and rub my whole face with olive oil till it just soaks in. And I said, at nighttime, he says, I wash my face and I rub the olive oil and I go to bed with the olive oil. So at his memorial service, he told me also that because he was a podiatrist and he believed that the feet were one of the most important places on your body, he said, you got to have good shoes. And he loved Stacey Adams' shoes, so I remarked that that's the shoes I wear. And so we hit it off on that. Just want you to know he taught me 2 things. He said to have good shoes, and I held up my feet, and there were Stacey Adams shoes on my feet that he loved. And the second thing is I put my olive oil on in the morning just for respect of Bernardo, and said I smell like a tossed salad, but I put it on anyway, okay? And everybody laughed. So, he was a fun guy. I mean, he was a champion that saw the big picture, and if I could live to be at least 100 and look like that, I'll have to thank Bernardo.
We hope you enjoyed the official Bernardo Lapallo Legacy podcast, produced by his granddaughter, Erica Chamberlain. You can find Bernardo's books, videos, Facebook page, and Legacy News by visiting www.agelesslivemorestore.com.